we are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm calling to order the February 16th, 2021 Readfield Select Board meeting. Thank you and welcome. Welcome to people who have joined us. Welcome to anyone who is watching via television. We will start with the minutes of the Select Board meeting of February 1st, 2021, which are in your packet. Do I have a motion in regards to those minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Yes, there is. Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Hi, Catherine.
I'm here now.
It was just moved that the minutes have been moved as presented in the packet. So we're in a discussion phase of that. So if you have anything you wanted to correct, go ahead and say so.
I'm all set.
She's all set. Any other discussion? Okay, the minutes have been moved and seconded, and I'll call the roll, which again is customarily what we're required to do with an online meeting. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Bruce is a yes. Thank you. Warrants 32 and 30. I think we're just doing 32 and 33. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we're doing warrants 32 and 33. The floor is yours, Ralph.
Okay, fairly straightforward here. Warrant 32, 356-06987. A couple of the components are state fees, 5,380.83, and B, 9,865.38. And then warrant 33 is the salary, the payroll increment, 16,486.97. In aggregate, we are looking at 372,538.84. Unless I have missed something, the highlights would include, to my mind, another Cushing installment for winter maintenance, $28,137.66, and then the regional school district, $302,909.02. So I would move that we accept and approve warrants 32 and 33 in the total amount of $372,538.84.
Great. Is there a second to that?
Second.
There is a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, it has been moved to approve warrants 32 and 33 in the amount of $372,538.84. Chris, we're voting.
Oh, yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Bruce is a yes. Gee, I'm looking around for Bruce. He's missing, man. Eric, there are additional warrants that are being reviewed tomorrow. Is that correct? And that will require
Yes.
signature. So
Those will.
great.
So sooner the better. Once I send the email out, if folks could come down, we need at least one to get the payroll released. That'd be the most critical. I hope Ralph could be available in the morning to do that once we get that squared away.
Great.
I will be here first thing in the morning.
All right. Well, wait for me to email you or call you. I'll call you.
I just have to be at the Augusta Civic Center by 1:15 tomorrow for phase one.
Yeah,
Hey,
baby.
that's excellent. Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Communication.
Mine's Friday, Ralph.
Pardon?
Mine's Friday at the Civic Center.
Good for you.
Okay, we'll have to shut down the chitter chatter here. Moving on to select board communications where you can do your own personal message. Does anybody have anything they would like to share? Dennis.
Hello. Hi there. I just want to talk a little bit about this year's Heritage Days. It is, right now we're planning to have it So we're moving forward with the idea that Heritage Days will happen this year in August. To be specific, it looks like it would be August 6, 7, and 8. 6, 7, and 8. This year we really are trying to focus on the beach and do some things on the trails. We want to do some things at the fairgrounds as well as downtown, and just have a lot of different ideas. So we are looking for folks who have some thoughts about ideas. I don't know how much we will be able to do, but I want to make sure that we still get a chance to celebrate. Last year we had the fireworks only. Seemed like that was a pretty good thing to sort of do easily, and people appreciated it. So want to do something in that same vein. I think we can have a small sort of great celebration and have some of the town committees be involved. It would be really cool if the different organizations around town had an opportunity to put some skin in the game, as they say, if this were boxing. But that's really what we're looking to do, and get participation by everyone, and find out what folks want. And it seems like by that time, probably just a chance to get out and see each other. So if you are interested in being a part of the committee for Heritage Days, please email me. It's dprice at readfieldmaine.org. dprice at readfieldmaine.org. And you can contact the town office if you want to fill out and be official member. We're looking for a wide swath of folks who want to have a great celebration of Readfield. So thank you very much.
I have
Thank
a
you,
question.
Dennis. Go ahead, Catherine, please.
Dennis, we've always had Heritage Days previously on the second weekend in August. Are we diverging for a reason?
No, I just did the first weekend. So if it's the second weekend, it would be the 13th, 14th, and 15th, right?
Right.
Okay.
You might want to just check with some of the other groups if they've scheduled things. I don't know if they have, but
Yeah.
okay.
All right.
And then I have a broadband update.
Thank you.
Things are moving along. Tonight we're going to be appointing a newish expanded broadband committee to continue studying how we can bring broadband equitably and affordably to the entire town of Readfield. So that's a big step, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Catherine. Anybody else?
Bruce,
Yes, please. Ralph.
it may be time to at least preliminarily update the board on the status of our endeavor to create a plan document for our quote-unquote retirement structure and progress to date. There is a draft RFP in play. We have asked potential vendors for their comments on same, so that when it is finally released for actual participation, that we have basically left no stone unturned, and there are no gaps, and we present a comprehensive document for our solicitation. That process is ongoing and getting close, I think, to a point where an RFP will be released.
So Ralph, go ahead and complete your thought, please.
Well, we had a preliminary meeting with the subcommittee that's charged with dealing with this. That's Chris, myself, Teresa, and Eric. And I think it gave us a much more clear picture of what we will have to do policy-wise to create a document that will serve the town well for the foreseeable future. So there will be some administrative decisions that will have to be made, most likely by the board, with the town manager and finance director's input at some future point in time. But as I think we have all understood from the get-go, the first step is to have a planned document in place so that we can begin the other discussions that will be important to creating a comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you both, Ralph and Chris, for your work on that. Obviously, I need to begin to schedule that into the agenda as needed for different board action. So I'll be in touch on that, and before the very next meeting, we'll get this, we'll know the placement of what agenda we need to have it on. How's that sound?
Sounds good, because I think there will be contract issues that will be a policy nature that might have to be discussed in executive session. And the document probably cannot be completed without the select board making management decisions as to how to structure the document.
Okay, I'll follow up on that. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. I want to go ahead and thank the Budget Committee for the minutes of January 14th and 28th, the Library Board for their minutes of January 13th, and the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee minutes of July 15th and 21 in 2020. So those will all be entered into the record. I want to make a special comment on the Budget Committee minutes. As I went through the budget this evening or I should say this afternoon, to update myself, I also read these minutes, and they're just such an excellent guideline in an explanatory way that, I knew much more what was happening. So in terms of the budget itself, I would recommend that residents regularly read this as they look at the budget too, that it's really part of the process in terms of understanding what was asked for, what was discussed, and they're very well organized. So I do appreciate the Budget Committee's work that's very evident in those minutes. We'll move on to public communication. Are there any members of the public joining us this evening that would like to speak on any issue? Seeing none, we'll move on. 21082, considering the appointment of Sonia Clark as our warden for the March 9th special election. Sonia Clark comes to us having completed the normal paperwork to serve as the warden for the election. She has served many times before, many times, I believe. So I'll take a motion in regards to her appointment, please. And this is for the March 9th special election, which is a state Senate race with us and 11 other municipalities.
I'll move the appointment of Sonia Clark as the warden for the special election in March as presented.
Second?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Sonia Clark as warden for the March 9 special election. I'll call the roll. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes?
Dennis?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
And Bruce is a yes. And now we'll move on to the appointment of ballot and election clerks. In front of you is a group of, in your packet, of Democrats and Republicans. They are evenly used. I'm not sure how many the town clerk will need to use, but she'll make sure that it's an even split between the two groups that we have. I can read the names, or we can just assume that the packet group is correct.
I would make a motion to accept the appointment to make the appointment of the 2021 ballot and election clerks for the March election as presented in our packet.
Second, please.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to appoint the 2021 ballot and election clerks who are represented in the select board packets. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes?
Dennis?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Bruce is a yes. We'll move on to considering the appointment of a slate of members to the ad hoc broadband internet committee. We have Catherine Mills Woodson, who would represent us and who's been doing yeoman's work on this from the select board. And then in addition, residents who expressed interest are Eric Felconer, Patrick McCormick, Lee Sandler, Brian Tarbuck, and Dan Wells. Are any of the individuals here tonight and would like to introduce themselves? Yeah,
Dan,
Dan, go ahead.
Dan Wells. I'm interested in being on a committee. I run the Winthrop Utilities District. I also operate the water system you have in Readfield Corner for the Winthrop Utilities District. So I am familiar with budgets and projects and lining up money for large projects. So I guess that piqued my interest, and I have some concerns that we add this to the tax rolls, and I just want to see how that's all going to pan out. And I guess that's all I have.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to ask Patrick to introduce himself, and then if any board members have a question for either of you, they can go ahead and do that. Patrick, please. Hi.
Good evening. I've been in the broadband business for almost 40 years, primarily in Maine. Started in Lewiston, Auburn, but really the broadband business in the Brunswick Mid-Coast area for a company. I was general manager, primary engineer, and then general manager for Susquehanna Communications, Suscom for short. But started broadband service in that area, both hybrid fiber coax as well as fiber, back in '95. So there's only 3 places in the country that had done that at that time, us being one of the 3. Did fiber optic networks for the Bath, Brunswick, Topham school districts, L.O. Bean, Bath Iron Works, and Mid-Coast Hospital, Parkview Hospital, and the list goes on and on. But I've been designing, building, and operating, including both capital and P&L responsibilities for sales, customer service, marketing, and technical operations almost 40 years. Currently work for Comcast, largest broadband provider in the country. I am the Senior Director of Market Development for Business Services, and I cover from North Carolina all the way up to New England. So my mission here, my interest is in making sure that all the assumptions and all the planning and the engineering and the operational models are well vetted, and that everybody understands exactly what we're getting into and what the associated costs are going to look like. I've run operations for many, many years, so I know all the ins and outs and the gotchas. I've been designing and building and planning and estimating and constructing fiber optic networks for Comcast now for 20 years. And I want to make sure that the residents of Readfield get a network, if that's the way it goes, that does what it says it's going to deliver at the cost it's going to deliver. The tax, payers, are at risk, obviously, and we want to make sure we do right by them, and we want to make sure that we have an operational plan that will be implementable and successful.
Thank you, Patrick. Do board members have any questions for either of the 2 applicants who presented? And by the way, we have had conversations with the other applicants, but I'm very happy that Dan and Patrick showed up this evening.
I don't have a question, but I'll just make a comment. I assume that everybody has read the communications that have been coming out about us trying to form a network. I mean, ideally, we would have loved to have had a company come in and do this for us and service us. But from what we've been able to gather, that's not something that's going to happen in Readfield. If that were to change, I think that would be the direction everyone would like to go. So the goal that we're working on right now is to find a way to bring broadband fiber to everyone in town equitably, at an affordable cost, at a speed that is what the residents would like to have. And by speed, I don't mean how quick it is. I mean when it's implemented. If this is something the residents feel we need to step back and take years to develop, then that's what we should do. If it's something the residents feel there's a pressing need for, then we need to look at how soon can we do this. And I think it's going to be wonderful to have people that have experience in all sorts of places to come to the committee and make this the best it can be for Readfield. So thank you guys for volunteering.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move the appointments of the slate that you
Can I
see.
ask just one quick question, Bruce?
Please, why don't I go ahead and move this, and then I'll let you ask that question just so we get the motion out there. Catherine Mills Woodson, Eric Felconer, Patrick McCormick, Lee Sandler, Brian Tarbuck, Dan Wells, to form a committee that will be an ad hoc committee with the mission of looking into the broadband internet access and proposals for the town of Readfield. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. It's pertinent to the motion that Ralph go ahead and ask his question, please.
I'd like to, first of all, thank you, gentlemen, and the other members who may or may not be participating. Your skill sets are impressive, and I think it's going to be a huge asset for the town as we try to move forward. I'm just wondering, and I hope I'm not putting the cart too far ahead of the horse, whether or not either of you have thoughts or experience with these operations being run or managed by regional municipal public utility districts, and whether or not you might have any thoughts on that.
Well, I'll jump in. I haven't had, direct experience with, regional, type networks. I've been involved with explorations of those type of networks, but I have been involved, in my general manager role with Susquehanna Communications, working with, municipalities on broadband networks and serving the communities and meeting the community needs. So certainly, open to that. There's obviously economies of scale here that come into play. So I think anything we can do to expand and spread the risk and the cost and the economics of operational expenditure savings across a broader area certainly makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, definitely. So I operate the Winthrop Utilities District, but we are joined for wastewater with Augusta, Manchester, and Hollowell. So I have some experience in dealing with all those entities, as well as Brian Tarbuck, the other person being appointed, works for Greater Augusta Utility Districts. He and I have worked together on things like this. Part of what I did is I actually joined the water districts between Winthrop and Monmouth. We had to find funding. We had to work through the politics of joining those two districts together, trying to get so that they would actually work financially. And that was done in 2000. We actually did get it. We got some grant money through CDBG and rural development. So I have those types of experiences as well, which I think I can bring to the table.
Thank you, Dan. So we have those appointments on the floor as a slate. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Dennis? Okay. Restroom break, I guess. Catherine?
Yes.
Hi, Dennis. Are you back?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I am a yes as well. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm impressed with everything you are bringing to the table. You're always welcome to stay at these meetings, but if you disappear from my screen, it's just like walking out of the back of the room during our regular meeting, and I don't mind whatsoever. Have a good evening.
All right,
You too.
thank you.
We'll move on to considering the appointment of Karen Peterson to the Cemetery Committee. In your packet is her appointment application. I will point out that Karen is a former cemetery sexton. She is the transfer station manager, assistant transfer station manager for the town. I personally see no conflict of interest whatsoever. I think she would bring out a great deal of historical, if you will, expertise and care to that committee, and I think she'd be a valuable asset. So I'm going to move her appointment and take a second, and then we can discuss it.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Karen Peterson to the Cemetery Committee. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to thank Karen for stepping forward to do this. She has a lot on her plate with her duties at the transfer station and in her personal life, and I really appreciate her bringing back all of her history to the committee.
You got to have a hobby, right?
Yeah.
This is a good one. Any other thoughts? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call the roll. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
And yes for me. Thank you. Moving on to old business. We'll have an update on COVID. We have in your packet quite a bit of information. But if you could just very briefly, Eric, I missed your town report.
There is no town report.
I could do that. It's just the treasurer's report, but I can do that now if you'd like.
Let's go ahead and do that and then flow into the COVID.
Sure.
Please. I'm sorry that I missed that.
That's okay. I'm a patient guy. I'll just wait.
Okay. Go ahead.
The report is for the month of January, and initially I just want to report that check reconciliation was completed for the month, and there was no unusual activity reported for that period. The audit, we are still awaiting the final draft of the audit. That's taken longer than expected because of COVID delays. And the budget, we have that on the agenda tonight. It's a fairly complete budget draft. There will be changes. There are always changes all the way up through the end of April. But I feel very comfortable now that we've gone through and looked at all the departments individually and got all the basic structures in place. The big outlier that we're not sure, exactly how it's going to fall would be the balance of debt service and municipal projects that we'll talk about at our upcoming capital planning workshop on February 25th. And that'll be at 6:30 p.m. and that'll be a joint meeting with the select board and the budget committee. So that's one of the ones that folks that have an interest in the budget, a lot of value there to participate in that meeting. Moving on to comments for the month of January, we should be about 58% expended as far as the budget goes, and about the same for revenue. We have seen a few anomalies this month. One, the largest really that's worth noting, is that we're about 20 something percent, 27%, almost 28 up in expenditures for the month relative to this period last year. That is because we actually split up our county tax payment. And so we had $120,000 come into that budget, and that pushed everything up. So things will return to normal next month. Last month, we were only about 2% above where we normally were. So this is just an anomaly. And I'll just report that we should see some more normalizing of revenues, excuse me, when we get into the February budget, where we have tax dollars coming in for final payments for taxes. And so...
which is a good reminder, everybody.
Yes, it is. And actually on that point, I wasn't planning on mentioning it, but we do have just a few properties that are still outstanding for 2018 taxes that are pending, very close to foreclosure. We've been working very hard to make sure we contact those people. 2 of the 3 that are outstanding, we've made a contact with and expect they will come in and pay the full amounts. We have one that is a kind of a particular case that we've actually foreclosed on previously and then had sold back during the redemption period. That one is going to be a little bit tricky, and certainly I'll definitely let the board know if we're not able to resolve that and that automatic foreclosure does in fact happen. But we're looking very good outside of that one that we've tried everything. I've talked to attorneys and gotten personal contact information, and we haven't been able to get that person, but we're going to continue trying until the very last minute. So outside of that, revenues and expenditures are looking pretty normal, and as are tax payments.
Are there questions on the treasurer's report? Move on to the COVID, please.
All right. So we're seeing some very positive trends with COVID, especially the last month. In the last 30 days, we've dropped from around 700 cases daily down to, we're now down to about 100. So that's been a staggering change and for the better. So we are loosening the restrictions that we had in place that were put in place to address that spike that we had. A lot of this stuff went into place October, November. And so we are going to be back and are back currently once we get back to the office to no more appointments. Residents can come in anytime. We do have a queue. We have no more than 4 allowed in the lobby, including the hallway at any given time. But we're back to the type of precautions we had this summer. So it's a much more functional model for both the residents and for staff. The amount of effort involved with scheduling everybody and having that disruption was quite significant. And so this memo really does seek to, and the changes that are being put in place, seek to address some of those disruptions and the fact that we've been operating on a pretty thin staff level and a lot of remote work, which isn't as efficient for close to a year now. So we're trying to play catch up, and we're also trying to make sure that we can relieve some of that strain on residents and staff. And so the big change, though, is the town office being back open just for walk-ins. And I'm happy to take any questions on any of that. I guess the last thing I'll say before I do that is vaccinations. The fire department has been vaccinated, those who want to have it happen. The fire chief did an excellent job putting together a policy on that encourages that activity. I'm doing the same thing. I'm encouraging residents and staff to get vaccinated if they have the opportunity. It's a safe procedure, and it's necessary to get the country, the state, the town back on track. So I want to just push that and advocate for that.
I want to just agree with that last statement. The effective date of the change in hours, is that February 15th? Monday.
Yes. Yeah. So that's
of course Monday was holiday.
Yeah.
So the 4 in the building at a time is effective now.
Yes, exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
Same thing with the staff. We have more staff in the office at any given time as well.
Okay, great. Catherine, I noticed you had a question.
Eric, it says in the packet that you're hiring a part-time administrative support staff person. Do we know how long we expect to have that person on board?
Yes, my expectation is that we would do that for a 3-month period, maybe a little bit longer, but just through the end of this fiscal year. And what I'm envisioning is 2 to 3 days a week, approximately $15 to $16 an hour, depending on qualifications, 15 to 17, I guess, depending on qualifications. And it would be just more or less administrative support to help out with the town manager, town clerk, and finance officer to help get through some of the backlog, some of the special projects that we've had to delay. I think that what I'm looking for, and if the board would like to discuss this, feel free, probably a maximum of about $5,000 for that period of time to get us back, back in a healthy position. Because again, we have been struggling to keep up over the last year, basically.
And do you have a proposed line that would come out of it from the budget?
Yeah, we have a couple of places that it could come from, but my first choice would be to just have it come from the administrative line that we have for supplemental office support. That would effectively overexpend that line. I think we only have a couple $1,000s in there, but it can easily be absorbed in the overall administrative budget because we are doing pretty well in that department. And I expect that we'll have a fair return at the end of the year going back into the undesignated fund. So I think it'd be a wise use at this point to expand that one. I guess it would be a division, no, an object line, and absorb that in the overall department line.
That sounds great to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Eric? Thank you. We'll move on to considering any potential ordinance changes for the June town meeting. And so this is sort of like the last call, if you will, to the select board. And we also have within your packet a possible warrant article. This isn't, not sure if we should take that in this item. But in any case, let's just start with the ordinance changes. We do know there'll be land use ordinance changes. Was there anything else anybody wanted to take another look at? Okay. I will go ahead and add in the warrant article that came from Deborah Nichols under this particular item of discussion. And that is, it is pursuant to declarations of write-in candidacy. And I'm probably going to have some follow-up questions on it. So I don't think we should approve this tonight, but I do think if there are questions in regards to it, we can voice those now, and maybe Eric can check with Deb and see if there's some additional information that we can get. So my one question is, first of all, I want to make sure that we are always as open in terms of process as possible to people who run for office, even if it's last minute write-ins. And I understand this declaration of write-in candidacy is in MRS 25013, and it's also mentioned in another place as well. So it's all in line. I guess my one question is, it does say if there's an exception that provides votes for candidates that did not file, those votes would be counted in the event that a printed ballot did not include a properly nominated candidate or properly nominated candidate listed on the ballot. So my assumption is if there was a vacant position and there were 5 or 10 or 20 write-ins for that position, maybe split amongst a couple of different people, those votes would be counted. Is that correct in my understanding, Eric?
Yeah, you're correct about that. The one caveat would be if there was also a declared write-in.
Okay, yes, you're right.
Then that one would be counted, and they wouldn't have to count the dozen or so other. And this, I think, generally really is just an efficiency thing for making the process of counting a little bit less burdensome. The one question I have that I haven't had a chance to talk to Deb about is how late in the game somebody can turn in that declaration. If it's a couple of days before, that would be just fine by me, but I want to ask that question as well.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions there, and I'm assuming you've noted them, Eric. Are there some others?
I just have a comment. I would like to see it a little less wordy. So maybe have MMA, or if legal can draft something that's a little bit more specific to Readfield. I mean, I'm okay with this, but I think it's harder for the general public to read through all of that, possibly.
Yeah, this is just kind of background information, and we would need to work it into the form of a proper article that is clear and understandable, because that's a mess, and that's okay. It's a rough draft or a rough idea and explanation of what's happening. One thing I do want to point out is that that change would not affect this coming election. It's
Right.
much like the change we made for setting terms that we did 3 years ago. This doesn't take effect until the next election because we wouldn't have that 60-day period or 90-day period to have that valid vote
May I?
beforehand. So
And it wouldn't be available for the coming election in June either because the town wouldn't be voting on it until June.
exactly, yeah, it would be for next year, basically.
Right.
Yep.
I just have two questions to ask about this.
Please.
Number one, are we, like, I know this seems like an administrative change. Would we all agree with that?
It's somewhat administrative, yes.
Okay, so I just want to listen in my heart, and I'm just saying this is how I am, so I'm going to share it. Are we making it more difficult for people to vote for who they want by doing this? Are we somehow restricting people? Is there somehow some way, because the only reason I'm asking is this. If someone's a write-in candidate, then it means that somehow they haven't turned in paperwork. Now what we want to do for them to be a write-in candidate is turn in paperwork. So I'm just trying to figure out a little bit more about how this is beneficial. If it's a purely administrative thing, makes the process go easier, but that's my question.
I think I can address that a little bit, Dennis. I think where it comes in is, say we have a local school board position open and no one runs for it. And there might be some people who are willing to do it if they got selected, but it really isn't what they want to do. And so you might have 30 different people written in. Somebody's written in twice, everybody else is written in once. Mm-hmm. And so then when they all have to be counted, and then the town clerk has to go through and call the person with the most votes and say, are you willing to do this? And if they're not, you have to go and call the next person, and so on and so forth. So I think that's where this is coming in on an efficiency basis, that if some people want to nominate you, for instance, to be in some office, they would just contact you and say, hey, Dennis, nobody's running. If you're willing, would you just get in touch with the town office and tell them you'll be a qualified write-in candidate? But we should probably get Deb to weigh in on that. But from my work with elections, that's how that has usually come out.
Yeah.
My understanding is if you declare that you're a write-in, then your votes are counted in any position where there's a contest. If there is no contest in, for example, the example that you gave for a school board position, all of those votes will be counted, and that process you just described will still be gone through. Okay?
Exactly right.
What would happen is if Joe Wilson said, I want to be on the school board, it's 72 hours before the election, and I'm going to get 20 people to write me in, and I'm going to call the office, and I'm going to declare myself as an official write-in, then only his votes would be counted. That's my understanding of this.
Okay, so the example I was giving where no one had declared, they would all still be counted. But if at least one person had declared, then they would be, and no one else, then they would be the only ones to be counted.
And anyone who and then if you have, for example, a select board position where, let's just say there are two candidates running, and there's a drib and drab of 2 or 3 votes for this person, that person, and so forth. Unless you were declared write-in, they wouldn't process those write-ins. So if there was a declared write-in, the 2 candidates that are running plus that declared write-in, they would all be counted.
So I think a lot of this discussion is what would be needed to somehow be put forth to people with whatever warrant article we come up with. But I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so we've got a list of questions. Did you have another one, Dennis? You said there were a couple of questions you had.
Well, I probably rolled them together. I just wanted to, I just want to make sure that we are not limiting in any way people's ability to run as a write-in candidate. I don't want there to be any impediment in people being, sort of declaring for the write-in. I just want to make sure and clarify for everybody that that's how it goes.
Yeah, and I think the intent is very straightforward. Somebody who wants to be a write-in, go for it. Just say, I'm going to be a write-in. And I guess there is a piece of paperwork, I don't know, or at least a notification. It's the accidental drive-by write-ins that we're kind of addressing in this. And that is when you have an open position and you have 12 different people that get one vote, that kind of thing.
Thank you for your clarification. Thank you, Captain.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm entirely clear, but we'll get more information on this. So we'll move on to...
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is this a housekeeping issue to head off potential problems in the future, or has Deb experienced difficulties in the past that have made election management more difficult?
I think it's a time thing, and I think Catherine, as a clerk, as an election clerk, might be able to tell you this. We know who has won every race, and then and before we can release those numbers, we have 30 or 40 odd write-ins here and there to make sure we count and record that are undeclared people who they had no intention of necessarily running.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think it is. We're going to get further information on this, Ralph.
I would agree with that. It's a time thing, and it's really for people who someone else thinks it would be a great idea for them to do it, and not the person themselves.
Yeah.
So
You're drafted.
I'll offer to work with Deb to draft an article for the next meeting, and then I'll make sure she's invited to explain a little bit more if there's any additional questions.
Thanks. Do we want we have Melanie here to speak to us. Would we like to take her business first, which is new business before the budget, since she is here?
It's fine with me.
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, Melanie.
Yes.
You may want, there we go.
There. Well,
We'll get you into order here. So in your packet is a main resolution to take action on climate pollution. And Melanie is asked to speak to us in regards to maybe the board putting this on the ballot.
Yes.
Okay.
Eric, did you get my PowerPoint presentation?
Eric, you're muted.
Of course I am. I was opening up to see if I could share the screen to allow that presentation to be run. So
Yes, you just have to have it open, and if you're the host.
yeah, let me see here. All right, you should be able to see my desktop. All right, and then if I open up PowerPoint, and then if I do,
Great, excellent.
if I do this, I want to do from the beginning.
Yes, great.
There we are. How does that look?
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank
So this
you
is-
so much.
Be about a 5-minute presentation, Melanie.
Yes. And-
Okay, go ahead.
And
The
so
floor is yours.
I am going to read it to make sure that it is only 5 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to have the opportunity to tell you about carbon cashback. It's a policy considered by most economists to be the fairest and most effective way to mitigate climate change. And it also includes the presentation of a resolution that would allow Readfield residents to support this legislation. Could I have the next slide, please? All right, I'll introduce myself. My name is Melanie Lantot. I live on 110 Thunder Castle Road, and I'm a 4th generation Readfieldite. I worked for the state of Maine for 40 years and I retired in 2011. And after that, I have been active in environmental advocacy. Next slide, please. And I'm sure that most people know that high levels of the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide is responsible for global warming, but they may not understand why we know that the current high levels of CO2 are caused by human activity, specifically the burning of fossil fuel. We know that the current CO2 levels isn't just part of a natural cycle because measurements from air bubbles frozen in polar ice show that CO2 levels have never been this high in 800,000 years. Next slide, please. Now this shows the history of global surface temperatures since 1880. This is how the increase in carbon dioxide has affected global climate. The zero line here is an average of temperatures, global temperatures from 1900 to 2000. The blue bars show the years that were colder than this average, and the red bars show what years were warmer. Note that every year since 1980 has been warmer than this average, and that the last 6 years have been the hottest ever recorded. Next slide, please. Now, this photo shows the effects of climate change a little closer to home. We've all heard how climate change has generated extreme weather. And in my neighborhood, we've experienced several violent windstorms between 2016 and 2020. This is my neighbor's property, Holly and Don Ramlow, and they've lost up to 20 trees. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, so how can we in Readfield tell the U.S. government to take urgently needed action to mitigate climate change? Well, there will be a legislation reintroduced in Congress called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. When, if passed, it will charge a fee on oil, coal, and natural gas at the source, starting at $15 a ton of carbon dioxide, with the price increasing $10 each year. The fees would then be distributed among all U.S. citizens and legal residents. For most low and middle income families, the dividend would be larger than the increased cost of fuel and goods. Also, there would be a carbon fee placed on imports from countries not practicing pricing carbon at the U.S. level. And so this levels the playing field for U.S. companies and provides incentives for other countries to price carbon. Next slide, please. Now, these are the benefits of carbon cashback. It's equitable. It benefits low and middle income families most. It's been shown by economists to be the most effective at reducing U.S. carbon emissions, with an estimated 40% reduction in 12 years and 90% reduction in 30 years. It's nonpartisan, revenue neutral, creates jobs, keeps money in main economy that's now paid out for fossil fuel, and it saves lives by reducing toxic pollutants. Next slide, please. And carbon cashback is widely endorsed. It had 85 co-sponsors in the previous legislative session. and it's endorsed by 3,500 U.S. economists, 651 prominent individuals, 911 businesses, 232 nonprofits, 132 faith groups, and others. Slide, please. Now, this is the recommended resolution. If passed by Readfield voters, the Select Board would notify our state and federal legislators, our governor, and President Biden that Readfield supports cash back carbon pricing. There are several carbon pricing bills in Congress, but the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is the only one distributing the fees directly to each U.S. household. Slide, please. Okay, so that's it. For further information, you can contact me. There are also several websites that give additional information. And the last one at the bottom, En-ROADS. Now, En-ROADS is an interactive program which allows the user to compare the effectiveness of climate mitigation strategies. And it finds that carbon cashback is shown to be the most fair, efficient, and effective. So thank you very much for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Great, thank you. So we're going to take questions for Melanie. I do want to tell you how this came about. People can either petition to put an article on our ballot, or they can bring it to the Select Board, and the Select Board can determine whether it will go on the ballot as a warrant article. And so Melanie is making this presentation tonight, asking the board, and we could vote on this tonight, or we could vote on it in another meeting in perhaps March. We don't need to finalize warrant language necessarily tonight. But in any case, so that's the plan here. I intend to move that we accept this, but before we get to that, let's go ahead and have any questions for Melanie.
Okay.
Why is the decision actually made to not do it by petition? I believe that's how most everything is done.
I think primarily because of COVID. There are people who have collected by petition in the past for different articles to go on our warrant. I'm not quite sure if historically we have added warrant articles to the town warrant by presentation, but you could argue that every piece of the budget is by presentation.
Bruce,
Yes.
what's the history of this resolution in other communities throughout Maine? I'm just curious as to whether or not it's resonated or whether we're the first ones out of the gate.
No, I actually have a list of towns and cities that have already passed it. Portland, South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, Brunswick, Arousig, Belfast, Vinyl Haven, Bangor, Hampton, Fairfield, Winslow, and there are I think there are a total of 50 towns that will be considering this or have already passed it.
Other questions for Melanie? What is the board's, what would the board like to do in regards to this? Would you like to vote on this tonight? Would you like to me to place it on a further agenda in March? What would you like me to do with it? I'm taking the board's direction.
I don't have any problem voting on it tonight.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move that we add this warrant article asking this question in language to be refined as we go through the process of adding warrant articles to our warrant questions here in Readfield.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now we have a motion on the floor so we can have some discussion in regards to taking this action.
Well, I would prefer to see it come through petition so that we have support from the townspeople to do it and not just from us. That's our usual procedure, and I'm most comfortable with that.
Okay.
I would have to agree with Catherine on this. It makes sense to control carbon emissions. And we should be doing everything we can to do so. But to place a decision like this in terms of bringing it forward to the town in the hands of a 5-member select board versus a town-wide petition, which might more representative speak to the will of the people, seems to me that the petition would be a better way to go if that's possible.
Thank you, Ralph. Anybody else?
It
Yes,
still
I
has
would-
to be voted on by the people. It's not something we're going to say it's that. It still has to be voted on the warrant, whether it comes through petition or this way.
Right, it doesn't take effect unless obviously it passes.
Yes, I would follow up with that. I respect and understand where you're coming from. My biggest fear always is that we are trying to do something on behalf of the select board that we're like, we know what's best for you. However, I feel like this it's to get it on the warrant so people can vote for it. It to me seems like the natural outcropping of having people have a say on it. The way that it gets there to me is it's like 6 on one hand and half a dozen on the other. You can go through this way, you can go the other. Ultimately, the ultimate petition is whether or not people vote for it. So I understand what you guys are saying. I get it. And I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. But knowing also now, you know, I know how weird it was to try and get petitions during my re-election campaign. And so I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out there. I understand that. I know where you guys are coming from. I know we feel comfortable with that process. But I would say, you know, to get it on the ballot, let the people have the say then, I think. And then if they vote it if one way or another, we'll know for sure. So. Thank you.
This also goes on the ballot. This is not a budget question, so it would not carry a board recommendation.
And we can get information out there in the papers and advertisers, and so people will have an understanding of what it entails before the town meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be your responsibility primarily. I mean, if
Right.
it does go on to the
Right.
ballot, the town is not going to promote it.
Yeah.
The town is going to ask the question.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So,
I just want to reiterate my sentiment that I would prefer that it be bottom up versus top down. I think that's a much more representative way of presenting issues of this magnitude to the electorate. But given the special times that we're in, I recognize that may present a difficulty. I just want to make sure, and if that's the sentiment of the board, I would certainly go along. But I just want to make sure that our recommendation that it become a warrant issue for the upcoming election, that we ought to be pretty clear that we're not endorsing, we're just placing it there for the town to decide.
that's correct.
Yep.
That doesn't preclude anybody from speaking about it, though.
Correct.
Yeah, as an individual, but not as the board. So with that in mind, I think I'll call a roll unless there's any further comment. Does anybody need the motion restated? It's to place this on the warrant. Chris,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes,
Dennis,
Yes.
Catherine,
No,
Bruce is a yes. So thank you, Melanie, for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your consideration for this
Okay, thank you.
resolution. Yes, thank you very
Great.
much.
And so again, just in a closing, I'll say that this is headed for the ballot, but this is not a town initiated warrant article. So thank you. We'll move on to, excuse me?
Oh, I was just going to say, and I can work with you if you want any changes in wording or anything.
Yeah, basically what we have is we have this, and as we develop the warrant articles, they go to legal for some review. And if there's any rewording there, I think it would be appropriate for us to let you know what that final wording will be.
Of course.
Okay.
Good.
Great.
Thank you.
Moving on to a draft of the FY22 municipal budget. Dennis, the floor is yours. Not Dennis, excuse me. Dennis, you know the entire budget, right? Go ahead.
I want to see Dennis do it. He'd probably do better than I am. So this is the third draft that we have presented to the select board. Again, as noted, this is a complete draft, having been through every department with the budget committee. The one area that we are still, as noted earlier, needing to review more fully and carefully is the area of capital expenditures and planning, and also a debt service, which is really the other side of that, or at least a component of how we make those things happen. So overall, what this third draft represents is another reduction in the impact on taxpayers. We had started off with prior drafts that included reductions in the mill rate and in the dollar value that someone with a certain value home would pay. This furthers that. It does so in part with the use of a bond, $250,000 bond for municipal projects. Right now, those projects are a bit amorphous, but two that could be plugged in there would be potentially the sidewalk and the sprinkler system for the entire fire station, not just the addition, but the entire fire station. We could also look at funding a portion of the road work out of that, or repairs to the library, those steps that we have wanting to be put in. So we have a number of projects that could be used to, or that could be benefited by that bond. But with discussions with the budget committee, it's come up again and again that we are under leveraged, and borrowing is a good way for us to help stabilize the budget. Also, we did just retire a significant amount of debt service with the payment of the last road bond. I think we still have a few years on one, but the most recent one that we retired has created a lot of capacity in that department. So let me just, I'll screen share very quickly here and just go through some of the changes that I had made. And that's my timesheet. That's not what I want. Let's see here. Where did it go? Did this last time too. Well, I'll just share this main screen and then I'll open up. All right, escape that. Okay. There we go. That's what I wanted. So as noted, I'll skip right to the page on the current mill rate, and I'll point out a few things there before I move on. And this is a high-level review, folks. If you have any questions, jump in.
As Bruce, I'm unmuted. As Bruce mentioned earlier, reading through the budget committee minutes was really insightful.
Yes, Ellen does a fantastic job. That committee has great discussions, and nearly every detail is captured in those minutes, so they're exceptional. So I did pull up finally. Excel spreadsheet's a little bit easier. I can just move through tabs, but this is a PDF. But one thing that you'll notice here is that we have another roughly 10% increase in the total base valuation. We talked about this last time. This represents the fact that the state valuation that we have for the town of Readfield is outpacing what we have on our books. And so in order to keep up with that, we do need to do a periodic adjustment. This is in lieu of a full revaluation. And with prices skyrocketing and becoming quite volatile, and not a lot of stuff on the market right now, it's not the best time or the right time to do a revaluation. So in speaking with the assessing agent, it was, at least he and I determined, that it would be most wise to do another 10% bump to that rate, or to the overall valuation. What that does is, if there are no other changes to the budget, if we had the exact same budget we had last year and we increased the valuation by 10%, you would see a commensurate reduction in the mill rate and no impact on the tax base. So that's almost what happened here. But what we also have is an increase in the overall tax base of about 1%, because of new construction and new renovations and all those building projects that people have been pursuing over the last year. So as you know, April 1st is when we cut off, and we expect pretty comfortably that we'll have a full % increase in that number, and that's reflected here. So this $290 million baseline is effectively a 11% increase, rated in that range, 10% being the adjustment for value across the board, 1% being an increase in just the overall tax base. So that looks really well. That helps with lowering the mill rate. And that effect that I talked about earlier, you can see it here. Last year, we were in the 16s or 17s, and now we're back down into the 15s. And to me, this just points out how important it is to know the difference between mill rate and tax rate. And just because a town has a mill rate of 5 or 7 or 12, doesn't mean they're doing better than us. That means that their property is valued at a higher rate. So what really matters is what people pay on their tax bill. And I will highlight that very quickly here before we look at changes again. This is the calculator that we use to show what's it going to cost. And so over the past 2 years, as I noted, we had an increase for a $200,000 home back in 2020. In 2020, FY21, I should say, that went up to 220,000. That's the current fiscal year. And then with another increase to the base rate, that would be 242,000 equivalent. Again, this doesn't affect what you pay in taxes, provided that the mill rate is adjusted accordingly, and it has been. Differences in spending and revenues have also contributed to this. And so what we saw last year was a reduction of about $92 for a house that was valued at $200,000 in 2020. And then we're looking to see another reduction this year of around $42. And again, this current fiscal year that we're looking at shows a 0% increase in the school budget. We know that's not going to happen, but what this does show is the actual impact of the municipal side of things, the municipal assessment, and we see a reduction here. I expect that by the time we're done with the budget, that number will be less. It might be $20 instead of $40. It's a small change, but it does show a pretty stable budget, and absolutely it shows a reduction. The board could work with this, and the budget committee could work with this and really do anything you wanted. You could make it an increase, but I do like and I appreciate the fact that the budget committee and the select board are working to have, at least on the municipal side, a flat budget. And so that's what we have, plus a little room to spare. And before I go on to the next list of changes, I want to ask if there's any questions.
I will note from reading the budget committee minutes that one of the members of that committee also serves on the school board, and she gave their aim as being very tight to flat as well. And while that'll be a heavy lift for them to do that, obviously they have some of the same budgetary approaches that we're utilizing this year. So that was notable.
Eric?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Couple of things in terms of how that borrowing level was determined. A little bit more clarification might be helpful. The other thing, at least from my perspective, is whatever that borrowing amount is, I think there ought to be a prioritization of projects that goes with that number, not just
Absolutely.
50, let's figure out what we're going to do after the fact, so that we know where that money is going to be spent and how much we're going to be spent on each individual project. And the next thing that concerns me, I understand why we're not doing a reval, because the market is just too volatile. And I understand why we are ultimately going to increase our values by 10% so that we protect the reimbursement levels that we get from the state of Maine. I'm just wondering whether or not that across the board 10% in lieu of a reval places moderate and lower value houses in more jeopardy in terms of their share of the total tax obligation than the higher end houses.
Yeah, so I'll start with the second part. It's a very good question. In short, when you have an across-the-board increase, all it does is amplify whatever may have been in place before, right? So whatever inequity was existing in the system already between, say, low value interior properties and higher value lakefront properties, that will be, that difference will be increased by 10%, right? So it doesn't do anything to resolve the inequity, but hopefully it doesn't make it any worse. And that's about the best I think we can do right now. I would love to see a neighborhood by neighborhood adjustment, but then we're getting close to starting to look at what will be a part of a revaluation. So it's really a stopgap, and I'll ask David if he has any insights in that, if he sees any areas where there are potential problems that we might want to address individually. But with the market being so slow for so long and then being so hot right now, it's quite hard to tell where the problems are without actually doing a full reval.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of your question had to do with the debt service. And basically, it had to do with balancing the budget in order to maintain that mill rate that we have and the net impact on the taxpayers. We had the ability to borrow some money to spread out some of these projects, which has been recommended by the budget committee. And that's what it does. We had that reduction that I was telling you earlier. This amount, couple $100,000. We've absorbed a lot of that actually in our capital expenditures for the year that are offset less than they have been in the past by use of designated funds. So the net impact there is that the debt service has gone down, but what we're actually using to pay for capital projects is increasing as far as the out-of-pocket costs. So between debt service and capital, we're maintaining a fairly static level there, and that's again something I try to look for every year to make sure that we don't get to the point where we retire debt and then say, well, geez, look at that, that's great, we don't have to put any more money back in because we're done paying for it, when in fact we have a very long-term, as you know, capital schedule that has items that are on there that have 50-year lives, and we need to have a certain level of savings in order to meet those needs. But that's this red line that you see here, these red bars, that is the impact of that $250,000 in borrowing that we would see. And that number really is, it's just there to balance. We could increase it to 500,000. We could probably increase it to $1 million without a major impact, because again, on the flip side, we would be reducing what we're taking out of the expenditure side for capital reserve savings and capital expenditures that are out of pocket, so to speak. So, but in order to do that, you want to have projects lined up that you think are achievable. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a lot on the 25th, is the fact that we do have, some catching up to do. We still have some limited capacity. And so I'm going to be advising the budget committee and the select board that we be very diligent and deliberate in the projects that we do proceed with next year and the year after, and try to keep that to a fairly modest level, at least until we can potentially identify some more resources to facilitate that. So that's a long-winded answer.
No, but so prioritization will follow once we have a number that we want to increase our debt service by.
Exactly, yeah, and like I said, I'm starting with 250,000 because it lands us pretty close to that tax impact that we want to see.
Yeah, and I think though, Ralph, that is a two-way street too, because there are projects that, so it's not, we have a bucket that we're filling. We do have projects that we do want to do.
We do indeed.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And didn't the auditors tell us that we didn't have enough debt service last time?
They didn't say that exactly, but they made that point, and the budget committee has made that point, and I tend to agree, because we one of the things that we do on an ongoing basis is we put money aside, and that makes our reserve accounts look a little bit funny. It makes us look like we have a lot of cash on hand. We do have a lot of cash on hand, and that isn't a bad thing, but it can make us look to an auditor like we're overtaxing, even though in the long run we're probably saving money by avoiding borrowing fees. But there's also the question of equity, and should you pay for a project that has a 25-year lifespan in a 5-year period? That's those type of questions are out there. I go back and forth on how to answer them, but
Worth less down the road.
If there's no
Yeah,
more
so I mean,
discussion,
the 25th is a very important meeting because we'll be able to kind of dig into this, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there'll be a lot more detail. And I revamped the road schedule and have a bit of a different assessment on that, increasing some of the cost factors. So things are changing, and we are updating that. So Bruce, if I could just go through the last set of...
Can I have a follow-up question on where we just were?
Sure, yeah.
Sure.
So I agree with Ralph, and I know we can look at this either way, but I think I'd like to see the prioritization of the capital projects first to see what it appears are really needed and necessary and where they fit in time-wise, and then try and figure out how much we should borrow. That's just my preference and how we look at that process. And I want us to make sure that we're keeping in mind that we have a broadband project coming up, and we don't really know what it is, but we need to keep in the back of our mind that it's there as we're making these decisions.
Yeah, I kind of see things that same way. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so I'll just jump back really quick here, and then I'll run through the changes that have taken place since the last time the board reviewed this, which would be anything from February 1st on. So on February 4th, after that meeting, I did add money in for the broadband project. Later on, I took it out because I think that there may have been some confusion on what the specific direction of the board was on that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that at the 25th, a fair amount, if not some later. But that was a big change. And I did also add the bond to look at some of those capital expenditures, again, in order to balance the budget to achieve that initial level of impact on the taxpayers that we were looking for. That resulted in a change to the mill rate. And then on the 13th, after some more review and discussion and another budget committee meeting, I did back out that $100,000 back to a $0 value, not knowing if that phase one was going to be considered at the June town meeting or not. And that's an open question, I think, but perhaps not. And then adjusted the mill rate and property tax valuation. Again, that was 1% up from 0.5%, and the mill rate reflected all of those changes accordingly. So that's the history of what's happened since the last budget select board meeting. Again, skipping over all of the work that was done at that budget committee meeting where we went through the third set of departments and really finalized everything that's on the budget. So I will stop sharing, and if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Other questions for Eric on the FY22 municipal budget as it stands now?
It looks great. Again, the presentation mode is easy to understand. I think it's easy for the general public to read through it, and kudos.
Thank you. We'll move on to, let me see, where are we time-wise?
We're
8
almost
o'clock.
out of time. We have 3 minutes.
Okay, let's see, we'll be close, I think, but we have the prior year abatements for the homestead exemption, map 128, lot 105. This is a fairly pro forma item. Eric, do you want to say something in regards to this before we take a motion?
Yeah, let me just grab that. So the homesteads applications come in to the office, they are processed, and then they are applied to the accounts. And we had one that came in, or at least...
I can learn to understand you much better.
I'm sure you
Great.
can. Yeah. We had an application that came in that was not recorded back in 2018. 2016, excuse me, 2016. And so the Board of Assessors has the ability to abate the current fiscal year in which that error was in place. They do not have the ability to go back further. The Select Board does have the ability to go back further, up to 3 years. And so what you see here is that that abatement going back 3 years, because as far as we can tell, the homestead was properly submitted. It just didn't get into the system. So that's why it's here, and that's what the resolution is.
And it's 3 different amounts? It's 3 different amounts?
Yes, because the mill rate and the value of the tax exemption changed over the years.
Can I have a motion in regards to this?
I would make a motion to approve the 3 certifications of abatement listed in our packet for Matthew and Melissa Rooney. Account number 517 to abate 3 years of taxes as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I just want to say, as the chairperson of the Board of Assessors, that the homestead exemption is very important. We have an opportunity. Always check to make sure that you've done it. If you've submitted, please help us do a better job. And this is an example of that.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and call the roll. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Bruce? Is a yes. Okay.
Catherine will get you, boy.
I know.
I would make a motion that we extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
I second.
We have no other items, actually.
I don't second that.
Okay.
But we have an executive session.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a motion that we enter into an executive session to discuss personnel matters under 1 MRSA subsection 4056A, and that's immediately upon the end of that executive session, we will be adjourned without any further action regarding the executive session or other matters. So we won't have to come back and then make a separate adjournment. Is there a second?
Are we inviting the town manager to
We
join
are
us?
inviting the town manager to join us for this particular executive session.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we're going to go into a separate room, Zoom room. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, I need to, I did a text or I sent Bill a chat asking for the ability to, for him to assign me the administrator role so that I can then create that group. So I think that,
It'll take a couple of minutes to get there then.
yeah, yep, I believe so.